Hey there, and welcome back to the channel. My name's Ramsey Dean. I'm a licensed therapist and social worker, and in today's video, I am going to answer your most asked questions about mental health. Some of these are from Twitter, some of these are from Google data, some are from Facebook, some are from people I've talked to in real life, some are from the comments on my videos. So I've compiled them all, and I'm going to answer a bunch of them rapid fire for you today. Make sure you stick around until the end of the video because I've saved some of the best questions for last. All right, without further ado, let's dive right in. This is a really good question, and a lot of my clients ask me this question all the time, actually. And the reason why I think people ask this question is because they want to know, why did this happen to me and can I get better, right? What I usually tell people is the cause of mental illness is multifactorial, meaning your genetics play a role, your life experiences play a role, but also your biology plays a role. It's never usually one thing. There are certain mental health conditions that can be more genetic. Bipolar disorder and schizophrenia come to mind. If you have parents or grandparents that have either of those conditions, you're much more likely to get it. When I say life experiences play a role, so this is talking about if you've had trauma, so physical abuse or sexual abuse, particularly in childhood, we know that that is a risk factor for developing a mental illness. If you're under a lot of stress, grief, if you're struggling financially, having a lot of hard things going on in life can make you at a greater risk for developing a mental illness. When I say biology, I'm talking about brain chemistry, right? So maybe you've heard of dopamine or serotonin. Antidepressants work by working on those chemicals in the brain. It's a multitude of different things that can cause mental illness. It's not just one thing. So just like the cause of mental illness is multifactorial, usually the treatment is going to be multifaceted as well. So for most people, the best treatment plan is going to have some type of arrangement of medication, lifestyle changes, and psychotherapy. I meet with a lot of people sometimes who think if I just find the right medication, that's going to fix my mental health problems. Or if I just find this right kind of perfect therapy, that's going to fix all my problems. But just like the causes of mental illness are multifactorial, the treatment needs to be as well. Everyone is going to be different. So for example, there are some conditions that we know medication is the primary treatment. Things like psychosis. So if you're hearing or seeing voices or you're believing delusions, something called mania in bipolar disorder, those things are very often treated primarily with medication. Then there are some things that our therapy is better for. There's a condition called borderline personality disorder that I talk a lot about on my channel. People with borderline personality disorder struggle with regulating their emotions. They have a lot of volatility in their mood. And usually people with borderline benefit from psychotherapy. They benefit from learning emotion regulation strategies, ways that they can help regulate their body and their nervous system. Now, sometimes they may also be prescribed medication, right? If the therapy is not working or if they have co-occurring conditions. So this is going to be really individualized for each person. What I would say about medications is that if you are going to therapy, if you're trying lifestyle changes and you're not seeing any relief or your symptoms are getting worse, it might be time to consider trying to get a referral to a psychiatrist or talking to your primary care physician about maybe starting medication. This is a great question. We don't live our lives in a vacuum, meaning that we can't separate our mental health from the type of environment that we live in. And so like I talked about before, your life experiences can be part of the cause for mental illness. If you're living in an environment that's abusive, if you have chronic toxic stress at work, for example, these things can all play into your mental health. But what if you can't change your environment, right? Dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT, has a set of skills that you can look up. They're called distress tolerance skills. These are skills that you can use when you have to tolerate a distressing situation, right? You don't have the ability to change the situation, but you need to get through without doing something that's gonna make your situation worse. Let's say, say, for example, that you get in a fight with a household member, they yell and scream at you, you feel really dysregulated, and you want to go to the bar and have some drinks in order to help yourself calm down, right? That might make your problems worse in the long run. So distress tolerance skills can help you to tolerate unpleasant situations and emotions in the moment. However, don't confuse distress tolerance for avoidance. A lot of times we stay in toxic environments, whether that be in a relationship that we shouldn't be in, a job that we stay in forever even though we're not happy. Sometimes we feel stuck in these situations, and maybe we can't get out of the situation right away. Maybe that's not an option, right? Maybe you need money and you can't just quit your job today. Can you tolerate the distressing environment of your job for now while you work to find a new job, right? That is a way in which distress tolerance skills can be helpful if you're stuck in a toxic environment. I think with kids, it's always a good idea just to start with your kid's pediatrician, because they are really trained in child development. There's a lot going on with kids, right? Their bodies are changing, they get sick a lot. Always start with your pediatrician whenever you have any concerns. That way they can rule out any medical issues that could be going on. They're just a great resource, so I always suggest you start there. Generally speaking, it can be hard to tell. How do you know if your child needs therapy? Because a lot of symptoms of mental health conditions are kind of normal for kids, right? Mood swings, teenagers have those all the time. Tantrums, outbursts, right? So what I usually say to parents is, if you notice any type of change in your kid's usual habits or interests that seem like they're out of the blue, if all of a sudden your kid starts having trouble at school, their grades start slipping, they start having problems with their peers, they start isolating, there's big changes in their sleep, also any type of regression in development. So typically children are moving forward, right? They're getting smarter every day, they're learning new stuff every day. So if all of a sudden your kid goes back in their development, your kiddo starts using baby talk all the time when they know how to talk, or they've been potty trained for a long time and now they're wetting the bed at night, or usually they're really happy to go to school or daycare or with, you know, auntie or whoever, and now they're not wanting to leave your side, they're being really clingy out of the blue and there's no explanation for this. Any kind of big sort of changes like that in their usual habits or in their development, I would say is worth investigating further. One other thing about kids, if they are having any inappropriate sexualized behaviors, and I'm not talking about normal age-appropriate exploration here, if they're having sexualized behaviors that are not appropriate for their age, if they're engaging in any kind of like serious violent behaviors, violence towards animals or other children, for example, or if they're engaging in fire-setting behaviors, those three things are all big red flags that need attention right away. So anxiety disorders are by far the most common. I recently read a statistic that about 30% of the population will qualify for an anxiety disorder at some point in their life, which I was kind of blown away by that. That's a lot of people. So under anxiety disorders, you have the most common is generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD. This is where people, you might just feel kind of anxious, worried, on edge, restless, kind of just about everything. So it's not specific to anything in general. It's just all the things in normal everyday life, going to work, paying bills, talking to people, like just sort of you're anxious about kind of everything. There's something called panic disorder that's very common. This is where you might have frequent panic attacks. And then after anxiety disorders, I would say mood disorders are the next most common. So these are going to be conditions like depression, bipolar disorder, things of that nature are also fairly common. If you're not familiar with bipolar disorder and you want to learn more about that, I actually did a whole video. I'll link it up in the card. I would say the biggest thing that you can do to take care of yourself if you have a family member or somebody that struggles with mental illness is to set very clear boundaries for yourself. So this could look like a lot of different things. Emotional boundaries are a big one. Not taking on the other person's emotions. I have a little saying for myself, like a little mantra, I don't let other people dictate my mood. If I'm feeling like someone else's energy is kind of rubbing off on me, I'll sort of say that to myself. I don't let other people dictate my mood. So being very clear about like, where do you end and where does the other person begin? I would also say boundaries around what you're willing to tolerate. Mental illness can be an exponential explanation for behavior, but it's not an excuse, right? And so it's not okay for you to suffer mistreatment. People shouldn't use their mental health as an excuse to mistreat other people. And so if are being mistreated, being really clear about what can you tolerate and what can you not, and setting those boundaries for yourself. I also think managing expectations can be really helpful for family members of people who struggle with mental health conditions. Progress in treatment, we want it to look like this, right? Just a straight line upward. But the reality is there's gonna be little dips along the way. There's gonna be hiccups. And so just expect some of that. You can't expect that someone's never gonna have a relapse in their recovery. That's just not realistic for most people. People have to be ready to get help. You can't force your loved one to get help. They simply just have to be ready. And so if they're not ready to get help, certainly encouraging them is okay, but a lot of times I see situations where the family member wants the person to get better more than they want it for themselves. That's not a good place to be. Lastly, I would say getting educated about their diagnosis. NAMI, which is the National Alliance for Mental Illness, I'll link them down below. They have a lot of resources on their website for family members. They run support groups. There's all sorts of different things out there. And also take care of your own mental health too. Get your own therapist if you need that. It's okay to ask for help. What does natural mean exactly? I assume the person that asked this question is talking about, are there methods other than psychiatric medications? The short answer is yes. We know diet and exercise, for example, can be very helpful. Things like journaling, music, mindfulness, right? All these things that you can learn in therapy, these lifestyle changes can be natural remedies for mental health issues. One of the biggest things that fuels depression is inactivity. So there's something called behavioral activation, where you schedule out meaningful, pleasurable activities and you schedule them out in a very structured way and engage in them. And that can help. Supplements or things of that nature. We know things like ginkgo biloba, I think it's called, and St. John's wort, can be helpful. However, what I would say is that if you're going to take a supplement for your mental health, you must talk to your doctor about it, because you might think, oh, it's natural, it's fine, I buy it at like CVS or GNC or whatever. You don't know how it might interact with medical conditions you have. You don't know how it might interact with your other medications. It's not regulated in the same way. So it's just really important that you talk to a physician. Please don't just try and do these things on your own. That's it for today's video. If you have questions that I didn't get to, leave them down below in the comments. I would love to do a part 2 of this video. And check out this video about cognitive behavioral therapy next.